China sharply criticized President Donald Trump's decision to impose a U.S. naval blockade on ships entering or leaving Iranian ports and coastal areas in the Persian Gulf, warning the move could inflame an already volatile conflict and threaten global shipping routes. In Beijing, China's foreign ministry framed the blockade as an escalation that risks widening the war and destabilizing the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime choke point vital to the global energy trade. A spokesperson said the U.S. military buildup and targeted blockade tactics would not bring calm, but rather intensify conflicts, exacerbate regional tensions, undermine the already fragile ceasefire situation, and further jeopardize the safety of passage through the strait. The spokesperson condemned the operation as a reckless step, adding, he said, this is a dangerous and irresponsible act. China argued that only a broader political settlement, not additional military pressure, could defuse the crisis. The spokesperson insisted that the priority must be a durable halt in fighting and urged all sides to uphold existing truce arrangements and return to negotiations. The message from Beijing was direct. A comprehensive ceasefire must come first, and only then can normal maritime transit resume. The comments landed on a day of heavy diplomatic signaling as Russia's foreign minister, Sergey Lavrov, arrived in Beijing for what was described as a high-stakes official visit. The timing underscored how quickly the Iran conflict has become a focal point for major power diplomacy, with Washington, Beijing, and Moscow each trying to shape what comes next. Earlier, China's leader Xi Jinping used a separate meeting, this time with Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, to argue that the world must resist a descent into raw power politics. Without mentioning the United States by name, Xi delivered a message about international order and alliances, calling for coordination between countries he described as committed to principles and reason. In a line clearly aimed at the broader global climate, Xi urged cooperation to prevent what he portrayed as a slide toward coercion and might makes right. He said, we must firmly oppose any regression of the world back to the law of the jungle and instead collectively champion and defend genuine multilateralism, thereby safeguarding the peace and development of our global community. While Beijing's rhetoric emphasized restraint, Washington's position was being shaped at the very top, with Trump describing the blockade as both a pressure tool and a strategic response to what he calls Iranian leverage over global trade. According to Trump, the blockade decision followed the breakdown of peace talks over the weekend, talks that ended without a deal, and came amid uncertainty over the future of a time-limited truce. The key date looming over the diplomacy is April 22nd, when the current two-week ceasefire window is expected to expire if it is not extended or replaced by a broader agreement. Speaking to reporters, Trump was pressed on the objective. Was the blockade meant to force Iran back to negotiations? Was it meant to reopen the strait to stabilize energy markets and reduce fuel prices? Trump's answer suggested the administration views the blockade as a flexible instrument designed to achieve several goals at once. He said maybe everything. He then argued Iran has been using the strait as leverage against the world economy. He said we can't let a country blackmail or extort the world because that's what they're doing. Trump also attempted to downplay U.S. vulnerability to the shipping disruption, pivoting to domestic energy production and telling reporters that the United States does not rely on the same Gulf flows as many other countries. He pointed to what he described as expanding American capacity and claimed shipments were already being redirected. In the same exchange, Trump suggested global demand would ultimately push more buyers toward U.S. supplies, and said vessels were already heading toward American ports. He also indicated that international support might be forthcoming, though he insisted it was not necessary. Asked whether other countries would assist, Trump replied that some had offered to participate and he would name them later. He said, we don't need other countries, frankly, but they've offered the services. We'll let it be known probably tomorrow. Then came the confirmation that the blockade was not merely a threat or a plan, but already underway. Asked directly whether it had begun, Trump answered, he said, yeah, started 10 o'clock. The remark was widely interpreted as meaning 10 a.m. Eastern time, aligning with subsequent reporting that the operation was already in effect. At the same time, Trump tried to leave a door open to diplomacy, claiming the U.S. had received outreach from the other side. In his telling, Iran was now eager to re-engage. Asterisk, he said, we've been called this morning by the right people, the appropriate people, and they want to work a deal. They would like to work a deal. Asked Adams even so, Trump's position on the core issue appeared unchanged, Iran's nuclear program. In multiple remarks, Trump framed the talks as collapsing over Tehran's unwillingness to accept what Washington describes as a binding long-term commitment not to pursue a nuclear weapon. Trump delivered the administration's central demand in blunt terms. He said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. He added that if Iran refuses, The U.S. would not proceed. He said if they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal. He also coupled that with a threat regarding the return of U.S. strategic assets or leverage, using language that suggested coercion if diplomacy fails. He said, we'll get it back. Either we'll get it back from them or we'll take it. Beyond Trump's own comments, senior U.S. officials described the negotiations as having ended without agreement, emphasizing that Washington had made its bottom line unmistakable. The U.S. side said it had laid out what it would accommodate and what it would not, and that Tehran had rejected the terms. A senior American official stressed that the main requirement was not just a temporary pause, but a clear commitment that Iran would neither seek a nuclear weapon nor pursue tools that could enable a rapid breakout. The official argued that even if certain facilities had been damaged or destroyed, the long-term question remained one of intent and verification, whether Iran would permanently abandon the pathway. From Tehran, the tone was defiant and aggrieved. Iranian remarks circulating alongside the diplomatic updates suggested Iran believed Washington was making what it called unlawful demands, while insisting Iran had legitimate rights and interests. Iranian statements pointed to conditions involving sanctions, relief, and other forms of compensation, and portrayed Iran as open to talks only if the United States dropped demands Iran considers unacceptable. At one point, Iranian commentary also referenced relations with India and shipping, suggesting Tehran did not want its dispute with Washington to spill over into conflicts with other regional partners. The remarks indicated Iranian leaders were attempting to preserve some diplomatic space with non-Western powers, even as the confrontation with the U.S. hardened. Russia, meanwhile, appeared to be positioning itself as both critic and interlocutor, condemning U.S. and Israeli military actions and urging renewed diplomacy while deepening consultations with Tehran. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov spoke with his Iranian counterpart, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, shortly after the talks failed. In that conversation, Lavrov condemned U.S. and Israeli strikes and called on Washington to demonstrate seriousness about diplomacy. According to reporting referenced in the broader coverage, Araghchi warned of perilous consequences from what he described as provocative U.S. actions in the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, arguing that shipping security is a global concern, not merely a regional one. Lavrov's approach, as described, emphasized continued bilateral and multilateral consultations, urging that diplomatic channels be fully utilized to establish a lasting peace and security framework. The call suggested Moscow wants to be seen as a key player shaping any endgame, even as Washington presses its military advantage and Beijing warns against escalation. The looming question now is whether the blockade becomes a temporary bargaining chip or the opening act of a longer campaign to choke off Iran's maritime access. A blockade of this kind carries major strategic and legal implications, including risks of miscalculation at sea. It can also trigger responses by Iran or aligned forces that could endanger commercial shipping, increase insurance costs, and tight energy markets, impacts that would reverberate far beyond the region. China, for its part, insisted the priority must be de-escalation and a return to normal shipping as soon as possible. Beijing urged all parties to stick to ceasefire arrangements and pursue dialogue rather than widen the conflict through maritime pressure. But in Washington, Trump's message was that the blockade is already in force and will remain a lever until Iran accepts the U.S. position on nuclear weapons and broader security terms. In short, the diplomatic front is moving in parallel with military measures, pressure at sea, calls between foreign ministers, major power visits in Beijing, and a fragile truce ticking toward an April 22nd deadline. What happens next may depend on whether Iran concludes the blockade as a reversible signal meant to force concessions or an irreversible shift toward a more direct confrontation in one of the world's most strategically sensitive waterways.